Heroes of the Seven Seas is a Gear VR game all about life on the high sea as a pirate to become rich, powerful, and the most fearsome pirate to ever sail the seven seas. Blah 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 blah. We've all heard the pitch for a pirate game 100 times before, but we all know that where each of them fly or fail is based on how good the swashbuckling gameplay is. The first thing of note about Heroes of the Seven Seas is that you will need a controller to play. Another important note before we get into the actual game is motion sickness. Now, most games in VR don't really bother me, but this one, whew. There are a few times where I honestly just had to whip the headset off because I felt like I was getting ready to decorate the inside of my office with a new coat of partially digested Taco Bell. With all of that out of the way, let's get into the actual game review. One of the first in-game things I would like to discuss is the visuals. Although I do like the style that they used for their art, there are some glaring problems that make everything look very unpolished. While the cartoonish nature of the characters are nice, there's open gaps in the models when viewed closely, very low-res looking textures applied to some characters while others have high detailed textures, and a myriad of other little touches that make the overall aesthetic seem a tad grating on the eyes. I understand that they have built a game to work on smartphones, and that's no small feat, especially in a 3D space. But at some point you have to put the quality of your models under scrutiny and just take the few extra steps needed to make them look presentable. Now you may be asking yourself why I say I enjoyed the art style, but didn't enjoy the visuals overall. It's important to note that artistic style in video games is not the same thing as graphical fidelity. Let's take a look at the brass ring of stylized art in video games, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker on the GameCube. The art style was so highly unique and polished to a fine edge that it will still look amazing decades from now. Style is the artistic expression of a game's visuals rather than an exercise of the hardware's abilities to push out X number of polygons, textures, and physics objects. But with this game, they hit an odd middle ground where they had a cool style but didn't really deliver on polishing that style to a degree where it holds up to scrutiny. In fact, it really doesn't hold up past a single play session, let alone years from now. Another point of contention for Heroes of the Seven Seas is narrative and pacing. While the game starts off with a very nice comic book-like cinematic, the rest of the game feels incredibly disjointed from a narrative standpoint. You'll go to a waypoint, talk to an NPC that mentions some issue that they are facing or your crew is facing, and then you'll click on a waypoint and then off you go to the next objective. It doesn't really offer much in the way of personality or immersiveness in the narrative. The pacing is something reminiscent of a drug-fueled blackout. By that, I mean you'll be in the middle of a mission, and I mean that in the loosest possible definition of the term mission, complete an objective, and then find yourself instantly warped to a new environment with not much indication on how you got there, why you went there, or what your motivation is. Despite the promise of a grand adventure the game starts off with, you're left accomplishing tasks that seem to have little to nothing to do with any kind of grand narrative or plot. They simply seem like one random objective after another, with nothing bigger tying them together. Alright, so what about the actual gameplay? Surely piloting a pirate ship through the seven seas and taking down rival ships is a recipe for hours of enjoyment, right? Sadly, the overall impression is meh. While the naval combat is serviceable, that's the nicest thing I can honestly say about this game. It feels like an incredibly light version of the naval combat in Assassin's Creed Black Flag. You'll point your broadside cannons at an enemy and fire until the health bar is gone. You'll purchase upgrades to make your vessel more effective as well. So the actual combat isn't really bad per se. It's just more of a problem that the combat doesn't seem to serve much of a purpose outside of presenting a hurdle for the player. You gain nothing resembling experience or currency. Even the enemy ships that you are taking down don't have much in the way of personality. There are actually times where the combat was so inconsequential that I would completely ignore enemy ships on my way to an objective, and my experience would have been exactly the same. Heroes of the Seven Seas shows a lot of promise. A solid idea in VR that could be the killer app that a lot of people are waiting to take the plunge into the VR world for. This game is sadly not that experience though. Good ideas are a dime a dozen in the VR space right now, but what the platform really needs is expert execution. There are a few good games that fit this criteria, but the list is very short and lacking in variety. With buggy visuals, shallow character progression, lacking narrative, and ho-hum combat, Heroes of the Seven Seas doesn't fit the bill. Here's hoping the developers are successful enough to make a sequel with all of those issues fixed, but for now, the quest for more compelling VR experiences continues.